The evening had begun like any other, yet something inside me felt unusually heavy as I stood outside my friend's gate. I had spent the whole week trying to ignore the quiet distance growing in my relationship at home, each conversation shrinking to brief exchanges, each moment together feeling like a reminder of how far apart we had drifted. I didn't come here looking for anything, not comfort or escape, just a change of air. Somewhere I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. My friend had invited me over casually, saying his family was around and I should join him for tea. It felt harmless enough, so I went. When he opened the door, he greeted me with his usual warmth, but my attention shifted almost immediately to the man standing behind him. His father. I had met him once or twice before, but tonight he seemed different, or maybe I was the one who had changed. He carried a calm presence, the kind that made a room feel settled just by standing in it. Mature, composed, observant. His eyes lingered on me just a little longer than expected, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel seen. We all sat together for a while, talking about ordinary things. My friend joked around as usual, filling the space with his easy energy, but every now and then I could feel the father's gaze brush past me. Not intrusive, just attentive, like he sensed something was off. I tried to hide it, the exhaustion that had followed me from home, yet somehow he seemed to notice every small silence I slipped into. After a few minutes, my friend excused himself to take a phone call. The moment he stepped out, the room fell into a softer quiet. The father leaned slightly forward, his voice low and steady as he asked if I was all right. I forced a small smile, saying I was just tired, but even I could hear how unconvincing I sounded. He didn't push, didn't pry, just watched me with a kind of patience I hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. He stood up slowly and gestured toward the hallway, suggesting we move somewhere quieter if I wanted to sit down and breathe a little. There was no pressure in his voice, only a quiet offer, the kind someone gives when they genuinely want to help. I hesitated for a second, telling myself it was nothing, just a private room to relax in, nothing more. The house was familiar, the environment safe, and I was an adult capable of making choices. Still, a strange awareness settled inside me as I followed him, as if stepping into a moment I didn't fully understand yet. The room he led me to wasn't anything unusual, simple, softly lit, comfortable. But the silence inside it felt different. Close, safe. He closed the door halfway, not locking us in but shielding us from the noise of the house. When he turned toward me, his expression had shifted into something gentler, more focused, as though he was giving me his full attention without intending to take anything in return. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, feeling the weight in my chest loosen slightly. He asked again if everything was truly all right, and for a brief moment I considered brushing it off. But something about the way he stood there, steady and calm, made honesty feel easier than pretending. I didn't say much, just that things hadn't been good lately, that I felt disconnected, unheard, tired. He didn't interrupt or offer unsolicited advice, he simply listened. And that, somehow, made the room feel even smaller. Not suffocating, but intimate. I hadn't come here expecting anything. I certainly hadn't expected him to be the one I opened up to. Yet here I was, in his quiet presence, feeling a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Something unspoken hung in the air, not acted on, not acknowledged, but undeniably there. A calm tension, a pull I didn't yet understand. By the time my friend's footsteps echoed faintly somewhere down the hallway, the father and I exchanged a glance that lingered just a heartbeat longer than it should have. Nothing had happened, nothing inappropriate, but a door had opened inside me, one I hadn't even realized existed until this moment. He closed the door a little more as my friend's footsteps faded away, leaving the two of us in a calm stillness that felt strangely comforting. I sat there quietly, hands clasped together, trying to steady the swirl of emotions I hadn't planned on sharing with anyone tonight. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stayed standing for a moment, studying me with a softness that didn't feel intrusive, just deeply patient. When he finally settled into the chair across from me, the distance between us felt both small and significant. He asked me what had been happening, not in the casual way people ask when they already expect the answer, but in a way that made me feel like he genuinely wanted to understand. Something about that sincerity made the tightness in my chest loosen. I began talking slowly, choosing my words carefully at first, then less cautiously as the comfort of the room wrapped around me. I told him about the quiet frustration in my relationship, the way every conversation lately felt like walking through fog, how I felt invisible even in familiar spaces. He didn't react dramatically, didn't offer solutions or judgments. He just listened, leaning slightly forward, his expression thoughtful and warm. Every time I paused, expecting him to interrupt, he didn't. That silent encouragement made me feel safe enough to keep going. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a calm understanding, as if he recognized my exhaustion from something he had lived through himself. He shared little pieces of his own past, not details, just the emotions behind them. Times he had felt unseen. Times he had questioned his own worth in someone else's life. His honesty surprised me. Mature men like him rarely opened up so easily, especially to someone they didn't know extremely well. But he spoke quietly, carefully, like he didn't want to overwhelm me. His openness created a connection I hadn't expected, something grounding and warm. For a moment, it felt as though we were two people in the same storm, finding shelter in each other's presence. As the conversation deepened, the air in the room shifted. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, almost imperceptible drift. The pauses between our sentences grew heavier, filled with something quiet and complicated. He moved his chair just a little closer, not enough to cross any boundaries, just enough to signal that he was there, that he was listening. When his eyes met mine, I felt a warmth spread through me, unexpected and unsettling. It wasn't desire in the physical sense, nothing like that. It was yearning, emotion, the kind of pull that comes from feeling understood, maybe for the first time in a long while. I became aware of my own breathing, the way it seemed louder in the soft stillness of the room. He noticed my unease and softened his tone, reassuring me gently that I didn't have to share anything I wasn't comfortable with. That small kindness only made the moment feel more intimate. I wasn't used to being spoken to with such care. It made me feel seen in a way I had been craving without realizing it. Even the silence between us felt meaningful, layered with thoughts we weren't saying out loud. There were moments when our hands almost touched without actually doing so, subtle movements, small shifts, the kind of closeness that spoke louder than physical contact ever could. I caught myself wondering why his presence felt so comforting, why his voice eased something inside me that had been aching for so long. He looked at me with a softness that made my chest tighten. There was no expectation in his eyes, no pressure, just a quiet recognition of something we both felt but didn't know how to name. A connection neither of us had sought but both had clearly sensed. The room seemed to hold its breath with us. I turned my face away for a moment, trying to gather myself, but the truth was impossible to ignore. I was drawn to him emotionally in a way I hadn't felt drawn to anyone in years. Not because he wanted anything from me, but because he gave something I'd been missing: warmth, attention, presence. When I finally looked back at him, he held my gaze with a patience that made the moment stretch dangerously long. No words were spoken, but something unspoken pulsed between us, delicate and tense. He reached out, not to touch, but simply to place his hand closer to mine, an unspoken offer of comfort without crossing a line. It was a moment balanced on the edge of something neither of us dared to define, a moment charged with vulnerability, honesty, and an emotional gravity that felt impossible to shake. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The room felt suspended, as if time itself had stepped aside to let us sit in the truth of everything we had confessed without ever saying the most dangerous part of it. My heart beat harder than I wanted it to, not because of anything he had done, but because of what the moment revealed about me, how deeply I had been longing for a connection that felt real, gentle, and steady. He must have sensed that my thoughts were spiraling, because he slowly withdrew his hand, giving me space without breaking the quiet understanding between us. He leaned back slightly, exhaling as though he, too, was struggling to navigate the thin line we were walking. "You don't owe anyone perfection," he said quietly. "And you don't owe yourself loneliness." His words weren't advice, weren't temptation. They were simply truth, spoken softly enough to unravel something inside me. I lowered my gaze, unsure of what to say, unsure even of what I wanted. The emotions pressing against my ribs were messy: guilt, longing, relief, fear, and something warm that felt both comforting and dangerous. When I finally spoke, my voice came out low and uncertain. I admitted that I didn't know what I was doing anymore, at home, in my relationship, in my own heart. I told him I wasn't looking for this connection, that I didn't even know what to call it. He listened without interrupting, his expression composed but undeniably affected. He wasn't pretending he didn't feel the same pull, he was just refusing to take advantage of it. The honesty between us made the air feel fragile. It was clear that whatever existed in this room wasn't just my imagination. He looked at me with an expression that was contradicting itself, wanting to reach out yet choosing restraint, feeling something yet refusing to cross a line that would complicate both our lives in ways neither of us was prepared for. That internal struggle was written in the slight tension of his jaw, in the way his hands remained carefully still on his knees. "I don't want to be the reason you hurt more," he said finally, his voice steady but full of depth. "You deserve clarity, not confusion." Those words felt like both comfort and heartbreak. I found myself wishing he had said something easier, something selfish, something that let the moment unfold without consequence. But his maturity was the very thing that made this connection feel different from anything I had experienced recently, different from the neglect, the indifference, the emotional emptiness I had become accustomed to. A long silence followed, and I let myself breathe in the quiet, knowing the moment was slipping into something softer. I realized I had a choice, the kind that doesn't happen in dramatic scenes but in quiet rooms like this, where feelings show themselves clearly for a brief second before life demands we decide what to do with them. I stood up slowly, needing movement to steady myself. He rose with me, maintaining a respectful distance, though something in his eyes flickered with unspoken emotion. I told him that talking with him had made me see something I had been avoiding, that my relationship was hollowing me out, that I couldn't keep pretending things would magically fix themselves. It wasn't a declaration about us, it was a realization about myself. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. "Whatever you choose," he said softly, "choose it because it heals you, not because you're running from something." That gentleness, again, was almost overwhelming. It anchored me in a way I hadn't expected. When I turned toward the door, he didn't stop me. He didn't reach for me or make any dramatic gesture. Instead, he simply said my name with a warmth I hadn't heard in a long time. I paused, glanced back, and in that quiet second, we shared an unspoken acknowledgement. Something meaningful had happened here, something emotional and rare, even if it would never cross into anything more. Walking out of the room felt heavier than walking in. But it wasn't the weight of guilt or regret, it was the weight of clarity. I knew now that I couldn't continue living in emotional silence. I needed change, conversation, truth, whatever that might lead to. As I stepped back into the hallway, the warmth of that small room clung to me like a reminder. His presence, his patience, his understanding, they stayed with me long after I left the house. And though nothing had happened, something undeniably had shifted inside me. Some connections don't need to be acted on to leave their mark. Some moments are powerful simply because they show you what you've been missing.